Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's talk. Thank you for joining us. So tonight we are very privileged to welcome Holly Dillon from Powys County Council to talk about how we build a nature recovery action plan in Powys. So I'm James Hitchcock, Chief Executive of Radnorshire Wildlife Trust. Been in post for just 7 months, and I'm hosting tonight. So I'm just going to do a very quick introduction to set the context really, and then hand over to Holly. So let's cover housekeeping to start with, just on Zoom etiquette. If everybody can just go on mute, please, just so we don't get any background interruptions or any coughing, etc. when Holly's talking, because when you are giving these talks, it can be quite disconcerting because you can only really see your slides and then one or two other people, so you don't quite know what's going on when you get interference. You can pop comments and questions in the chat box, but what we're going to do is Holly's going to talk first, and then I'm going to do a little bit following on from her, which is quite brief, just about how Radnorshire Wildlife Trust is working towards achieving this nature recovery action plan, and what actually the physical delivery looks like for us. And then we'll do questions at the end. We don't think we'll need a break, but if Holly really gets into it and it looks like people are enjoying it, we might do a little bit of a break after she's talked. So yeah, I think that covers all the sort of general signposting and housekeeping. So the nature recovery action plan. Wow, what does that mean, and sort of where are we? Well, I was talking with colleagues today, and I think we are really at very interesting point in time for nature conservation and nature's recovery. There's a huge public interest now in nature, climate change, and taking action and doing things differently. And I think that's been spurred on by a number of things, in part the pandemic, and people being locked down and having to spend more time locally. But also I think it's a culmination, isn't it, of the calls to action that we've seen over the years, and the rising obvious impacts of changing climate on our local weather and our local lives. And, we've obviously, politically, I suppose, and socially gone through a lot of change. And we're at a point now where we are looking at a once in a career for anybody working in conservation, change in policy and funding for nature and land management. And probably for everybody on this call, a once in a lifetime change in terms of the significance of the policy that underpins some of what helps us deliver good nature conservation. So if that can combine with this level of interest, we might see real changes, because funding and policy is only one part of it. We can't really do anything without the support and buy-in of people out there on the ground. We've seen some big commitments, haven't we? The UN have talked about the need to work towards a target of managing 30% of the land and 30% of the sea by 2030. And, that's a big change, isn't it? That's a big move. But what would that look like locally? What would we actually do? And what technical data would underpin how we would make those decisions, or even begin to have conversations with people about how we might go about funding nature in the right place and in the right way. And Holly's here to sort of help us understand that and help us understand what that technical underpinning data is. So I will now make Holly the host and hand over to her, and she will launch her talk and take things from there. Right,
brilliant. I'm the host now. Thank you, James, and thank you, Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, for having me tonight. Bear with me for 1 second. I'll just share my screen. So I'm hoping, it's all disappeared for me now. There we go. Can everyone see that okay? I can see some nods, good. So yes, as James was saying, I'm talking tonight about the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan. So yeah, I'm the Biodiversity Officer / Local Nature Partnership Coordinator, and I work on the Local Nature Partnerships Cymru project, also known as the LNP Cymru project. So I'm just going to quickly introduce that project to start with, and then the Powys Nature Partnership and the work so far on the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to move myself out of the way because all I can see is my face at the moment. So the LNP Cymru project, it's all about partnership working, as the name suggests, local nature partnerships. So, you know, sharing skills, knowledge, expertise and resources to protect and enhance nature in Wales. It's a Welsh Government funded project, 3 years in total. And basically it's to support the local nature partnerships to help them take local action to address the rapid declines in wildlife that we're seeing across Wales. So the project aims to build a nature recovery network across Wales, engaging people, communities, businesses and decision makers in both practical action and strategic planning for a healthy, resilient and nature-rich Wales. So the project started in 2019 and is running until next year, so April 2022. But obviously with everything that happened last year, it took a bit of a break and it took a while to get things going really. So the partnership, the project itself is a partnership effort. It's led by WCVA, so that's Wales Council for Voluntary Action, with Welsh Government, and then the Wales Biodiversity Partnership, the local environment record centres, and then the local authorities and national park authorities all working together. So through this funding, there is now a LNP coordinator / biodiversity officer / some of them are also called LNP implementation officers. I think we've all seemed to have different names. Basically, there's one of me in each local nature partnership now. So there's 21 active local nature partnerships across Wales. And then all the coordinators are hosted by the local authority or the National Park Authority. So I started earlier this year. I think I'm about 6 months in now. So as the coordinator for Powys, it's my job to reinvigorate our local nature partnership. So in Powys, it has been dormant for a few years now, and it's part of my job to try and expand and broaden the partnership as well. And then obviously to work with the partnership too to develop our local nature recovery action plan, which I'm talking more about in a bit. And yeah, generally my job is to encourage partnership working and local action to help protect, improve and enhance nature in Powys. I'm hoping this works now. This is just the video that was made for Wales Nature Week, just to give you an idea about what the project is all about. Sorry, it's up on my screen there. I'm hoping this will play. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. It keeps going for a little bit at the end, right? Oh, no, it's going again. There we go. Sorry about that. Right, so basically onto the Powys Nature Partnership now. So we are a group of organisations and individuals working together to conserve Powys's wildlife for the future. So the current partnership includes organisations such as Radnorshire Wildlife Trust, we've got NRW, that's Natural Resources Wales, BIS, so that's Biodiversity Information Service, our local environment record centre, and we've got Powys County Council, Seven Rivers Trust, Wye and Usk Foundation, Woodland Trust, National Trust, I'm trying to see if I can list them all here, Welsh Water as well, and then plus local experts and county recorders as well. So we cover the whole of Powys outside of the Brecon Beacons National Park. The park itself benefits from its own local nature partnership and its own local nature partnership coordinator. So in Powys, outside of the park, we are responsible for coordinating, promoting and recording existing and new actions to conserve, promote and enhance nature in Powys. So that includes involvement in networking and sharing best practice with sort of each other in the partnership, but also with others outside of it as well, such as, landowners, community groups, businesses. It involves involvement in sort of practical conservation projects as well, local policy development, reporting, education and raising awareness too. So the local nature partnerships sort of across Wales have been on and off, I think it's fair to say. They first formed in the early 2000s when the local biodiversity action plans were being created. A few of them have remained active since then, such as Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire. And they've done lots of great partnership working, which is what inspired the idea for the LNP Cymru project, basically to get all these partnerships back together again. So like the others in Powys, we're very much the same. It's been on and off since the early 2000s. And that's mainly because the local nature partnerships are dependent on having a coordinator in place to help, bring everyone together. But there hasn't always been funding around to do that, basically. So until earlier this year, the Powys Nature Partnership had been dormant for a few years. So that's probably why you haven't heard of us before. There we go. So the main piece of work the partnership is working on is the Nature Recovery Action Plan, as I mentioned before. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this already, and I don't need to go into too much detail about the doom and gloom of it all. But, as we know, Wales's wildlife is undergoing rapid change. The State of Nature report in 2019 estimated that 1 in 6 of Wales's species are at risk of extinction. And since monitoring began in the 70s, 73 species have already gone extinct, and a further 666 species are threatened with extinction in Wales. So to try and tackle these ongoing declines, Welsh Government created a Nature Recovery Action Plan for Wales. It's a strategy and action plan for nature conservation, as the name suggests. It highlights threats, priorities, opportunities, and the actions needed to protect nature. It's an all Wales plan for everybody involved in biodiversity action in Wales. It's a national strategy which aims to support our species and habitats, both for their own sake, but also to ensure that we have healthy, functioning ecosystems for our future generations too. So the Wales plan set 6 key national objectives in order to tackle the biodiversity declines. And then each local nature partnership in Wales will publish their own local nature recovery action plan, so tailoring the response to these 6 national objectives in order to reflect local priorities. So most of the other local nature partnerships are working on their nature recovery action plans at the moment as well, and a few of them have already got theirs published or part of theirs published, so you can have a look on those online. So Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire and the Brecon Beacons National Park have already published their plans. So these are those 6 national objectives that I was talking about from the Wales Nature Recovery Action Plan. So they are to engage and support participation and understanding to embed biodiversity throughout decision making at all levels, to safeguard species and habitats of principal importance and improve their management, to increase the resilience of our natural environment by restoring degraded habitats and through habitat creation, to tackle key pressures on species and habitats, to improve our evidence, understanding and monitoring, and finally to put in place a framework of governance and support for delivery. So the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan is being planned and produced by the partnership. The plan will guide the work of the partnership by identifying the actions that need to be taken to protect and enhance nature here, highlighting where we need to focus our efforts and where there are conservation opportunities as well. It will be used to stimulate project ideas, to direct conservation efforts, and provide a rationale for local action to achieve national objectives. The plan will be an essential tool for developing projects to be undertaken not just by sort of conservation stakeholders in the partnership, but also by the general public as well, highlighting what we can all do to protect and enhance nature. And alongside this work on the actual plan, the partnership aims to communicate the message of the importance of nature for everyone in Powys. So, what it does for us, why preserving what we already have is so important, and how improving habitat connectivity can help with nature's recovery. So a bit of an overview of nature in Powys. So Powys is known for its rural nature, obviously, and its varied and beautiful landscapes. We've got extensive patchworks of enclosed farmland and then windswept uplands around the Ellen Valley and sort of the rugged Cambrian mountain areas as well. So as a consequence of the sheer size of the county, Powys has a considerable diversity of habitats, supporting a diverse range of species. So we've got, everything from broadleaf woodlands, heathlands, streams, rivers, lakes, peat bogs. We've got cliffs and rocky outcrops, meadows and grasslands. We've also got our urban environments, our gardens and green spaces in our towns as well, which can support different species. And the county has even got a small stretch of coastline along the tidal river bank at the head of the Dovey Estuary too. So we do have a bit of everything here, really. And whether they cover large or small areas, all of these varied habitats add to the richness of biodiversity in Powys. We also have many habitats which have been identified as priority for conservation in Wales, such as Ross Pasture even, which Radnorshire Wildlife Trust have got a project working on at the moment. We've got other priority habitats such as upland oak woodland, wet woodland, upland heathland as well, and blanket bog. We've got a number of designated sites in the county too. So a number of these are internationally and nationally protected, including special areas of conservation, special protection areas, national nature reserves. And we have over 200 sites of special scientific interest too, so SSSIs. We have a species identified as a priority for conservation within Wales, such as the rare pearl-bordered fritillary butterfly, which relies on south-facing bracken slopes and freed habitat. We've got the red squirrel, which can be found in the coniferous forests of northwest Brecknock. We've got curlews and skylarks, the Welsh clearwing as well in Radnorshire, to name just a few. But the problem is, as with elsewhere, they're only just hanging on. We're very lucky to have all of this on our doorstep, but as with elsewhere in Wales, wildlife is in decline, so we need to do more to help protect these habitats and the species that rely on them. So one of the focuses of the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan is to improve habitat connectivity. We cannot rely on these protected sites alone to protect our priority species and habitats. Across the world, protected sites of one type or another have formed the basis of most conservation efforts, and then management of protected areas is commonly focused on sort of individual sites, but we know that habitat loss and fragmentation are key drivers of these biodiversity declines. So we risk ending up with sort of fragmented, isolated pockets of protected sites with nothing else in between, essentially. And obviously this is a problem then because species need to be able to move around in search for food, water, shelter, to find a mate as well. So if they're confined to these small fragmented pockets, then they're not able to respond to disturbances too. So this could be in terms of human impact, natural disasters, climate changes as well. So for example, if you think of an isolated patch of woodland and, potentially that area is going to be destroyed by logging, if there's no other woodland around in that area, then the species there can't move, they can't get to a safe place basically, so they're not going to be able to survive. And disturbances could also come in the form of natural disasters, flooding and wildfires, and unfortunately some things which are going to become more common, with climate change too. And with climate change, we're also then seeing shifts in species and where they're living. A lot of them are moving northwards, sort of in search for cooler climates, and also as the climate's warming as well, they're sort of moving northwards, other species, you know, as the conditions become more favourable for them. So increasing the ease with which species are able to move through the landscape will help them to better respond to these changes, basically. So we therefore need to look at the wider landscape, joining up habitats and sites to allow species to move around to ensure they can survive. Have I skipped a slide there? Bear with me a second. No, I haven't. No, so I just missed out that sort of second point there. So what we need to do is create more space for nature. We need these spaces to be bigger, better, and more joined up. And this is identified in the John Lawton review, Making Space for Nature review, sorry. So we need to look to create networks of protected habitats for more effective conservation. Therefore, the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan focuses on conserving what we have and restoring habitats to improve connectivity across the landscape, to join them up to create a nature recovery network. So the technical term for these nature recovery networks is resilient ecological networks, which is a bit of a mouthful really. So a resilient ecological network is a network of well-connected habitats where species can survive even in the face of natural disturbances and human activities. So this could be a network of species-rich grasslands, for example, full of wildflowers, which are then connected by, you know, wildflower field margins and road verges. So resilient ecological networks are made up of core habitats, so that's the areas of high quality habitat that are of high nature value and can support many species. And then what we also have are stepping stone habitats, which can help species to move through the landscape. So these are smaller areas of quality habitat. They aren't large enough to support many species on their own, but they form a network then with the core habitats and act as stepping stones, as the name suggests, letting species move around. So by mapping our ecological networks, we can then identify where these core and stepping stone habitats exist, and then where opportunities exist to connect these areas up. So increasing connectivity then increases the resilience of these habitats, allowing species to move, adapt, and escape threats. So to understand where our current resilient ecological networks exist and identify where there are opportunity areas to enhance these networks and to connect them up, the partnership commissioned a consultancy to map the networks. So we now have these ecological network maps for woodland, grassland, heathland, wetland and scrub and freed habitats in Powys. They've also created maps to show the opportunity areas too, identifying areas where we can connect these networks. So this provides a really important insight into where we're currently at, essentially, and where we need to make improvements. So the example on the screen there is the woodland network. I know it's quite hard to see just that bit. I will zoom in a second. But what we do know from the analysis that was carried out by the consultancy, it's estimated that sort of 45% of that network that you can see on the screen there is connected, so allowing, you know, woodland species to move around with relative ease. However, only around 7% of that woodland network is actually core woodland, and only 21% of that network lies within protected areas. So it's obviously important that we, you know, maintain this current network, protect the core areas, look for opportunities to enhance these core areas, and then, you know, restoring habitats as well to help connect it up elsewhere. And yeah, creating more stepping stones too to improve connectivity. So these maps can all be viewed online. They're on the BIS website, that's Biodiversity Information Service. So you can actually zoom in and out and look at different areas, and you can see the link at the bottom there. So I zoomed in into Radnorshire to have a look, and in Radnorshire it's mainly that sort of central area where the most woodland occurs. So a good example of well-connected woodland can be seen around Abergwmere. So we can see that there are well-connected woodland areas here in black. I'm hoping you can see my mouse on the screen. So these are the core habitat areas you can see on the legend there. And then in this green colour, you can then see the stepping stones in between. And then this sort of lighter green colour basically is showing where they're connected. So what we can see from this, sorry, and then the areas I've marked in red are 2 SSSIs in the area. I've lost my trail of thought now, sorry. So what we can see here basically is that, you know, is a good example of connected woodland in the area. We can see that this SSSI here is actually connected to the other one up there. There's these core habitats, and you can see the stepping stones in between, and it's following a brook along there. So that's basically what we're looking at with these maps, just to identify, you know, where these networks exist already. But then what we can do is have a look at the opportunity maps as well. So again, you can view these online as well even. So these can be used to guide habitat management, restoration and habitat creation projects. So the opportunity maps look at sort of the current core area. So you can see this is the area I was looking at that last slide there. Sorry, and then look at the areas where there's opportunity to enhance and connect the current network. So yes, on this one, sorry, I'm hoping you can see my mouse. You can see the darker green is the core network, so what already exists. Then this green colour here are opportunities around the core network, so where we can expand the core areas. We've got this almost lime green colour, I'm going to call it, which you can then see around the stepping stones, so where we can increase the size of those as well. And then I'm not sure what colour to call this, a lighter lime green around the current network then which is opportunities where we can enhance this network. And then there's also opportunities outside of the network, so you could do some woodland creation here, but it's not really going to be connected, but we could look to do it in the future if we can then, you know, focus on these areas first and then look to there and try and connect up all the dots essentially. Obviously, it's not going to be quite as simple as that. You know, it will depend on the site conditions. We'll have to go out and have a look what's there. Depends on landowners wanting to be involved as well, but these maps can be used as a guide essentially. So this is another example here of the opportunity maps, and this is from the Wetland Opportunity Map. So we're just south of Radar here. So on this one, you can see the turquoisey colour is existing core habitat. Darker blue is then opportunities to expand the core habitat. And then we've got, I don't know what to call this colour, like a dusky blue colour, I suppose, which are opportunities around the stepping stones. But what we can also see here, I've lost my mouse, are opportunities within the areas that used to be wetland too. So again, this can be used to guide work. You know, we might have someone approach us saying, oh, we really want to do some tree planting in this area. Then we can take a look at the maps and go, oh, well, actually, that could be an important part of the wetland network. So actually, we should look to do that instead. And obviously the wetland network as well is going to contain peat bog habitats. So planting trees in this area could do more harm than good, as these habitats are really good for storing carbon. Far more better at storing carbon than woodland is. So, you know, we do need to take any opportunities we have to restore these habitats. And then obviously other benefits as well, you know, restoring peat bogs can also help with flooding too, slowing the flow of water in the uplands. So yeah, these maps are just useful to guide our work, basically, to see where the opportunities are, to guide habitat management, creation and restoration work. And then what would be really nice is if in, you know, 5 or 10 years time, we could do another mapping exercise again and then see how things have changed. Sorry, bear with me, my voice is going a bit croaky here. So I know this is a bit hard to look at. I will try and explain it best. So what we've also done is mapped all of the opportunity areas. So this here you can see it's called the Combined Network Opportunity Map. So the dark areas, black more or less, are core and stepping stone habitats. So it could be for any of the networks that I mentioned. So we've got woodland, grassland, wetland, heathland. And all the green areas are essentially opportunity areas for one network or another, or maybe for a few networks. So we are very lucky in Powys that we have so many opportunities where we can enhance these networks, because it's so rural here and we have lots of land that hasn't been developed on. So the wildlife trusts are calling for at least 30% of our land and sea in the UK to be connected and protected for nature's recovery by 2030. And in Powys, it's definitely achievable. You can look at that map there. We have, you know, lots of opportunities where we can expand these networks. And as I was saying before, obviously it depends, you know, on landowners and everyone else getting involved. And this is a working landscape. So, you know, we do need to look at finding ways for people and nature to thrive. But we can work with landowners in the area to help connect up the habitats using these maps. I know this combined network map is a bit hard to look at, to be fair, but I just wanted to show all of the opportunities that we have. You know, there's only a few areas that are white, and basically it says no opportunities. I should have had to look actually what's in this area and why there's no opportunities. But the main point to get across from this slide is we've got plenty of space here basically to make a real difference. And then reaching this 30 by 30 target as well could be massively beneficial to tourism too. You know, with so many people now appreciating nature, as James was saying before, due to the pandemic, you know, lots of people have been spending more time outside, noticing what's on their doorstep. And there's been a big increase, you know, in ecotourism and people wanting to go out and experience the natural world. So if we could have these ecological networks stretching across the county, could be a massive boost to the local economy as well. It could be, you know, a big tourist attraction for people to come and see our wildlife here. And then also, as I touched on the slide before this, restoring habitats and managing them appropriately will also assist in our fight against climate change too. People only tend to think about tree planting for storing carbon, but you know, our grasslands, peatlands, heathlands, freshwater, and all of our other habitats store carbon too. And sort of the healthier they are and the better looked after they are, then the more carbon they will store. So a bit of a recap on what's happened so far with the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan. So the work started on this way back in 2016, and that's when the partnership commissioned a consultancy to produce those maps. They also reviewed the local biodiversity action plan as well. So that's what was created, I think it was in 2002, the Powys one. So the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan is going to build on the local biodiversity action plan, updating the actions to reflect our current situation. The Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan is not going to replace the local biodiversity action plan, as that's going to remain a valuable source of information and advice specific to the species and the habitats that were included in that plan. So the Nature Recovery Action Plan differs because we're basically updating actions to reflect the current situation, and then we're also taking this more landscape scale approach using the maps that you've just seen. And that was following the recognition from the partnership that most of the conservation objectives for many of our priority species can be achieved through conserving and restoring our priority habitats. So the plan is mainly made up of a series of habitat action plans. And then where these plans will not secure the desired objectives for our priority species, standalone group species action plans have been prepared. So this work in 2016 also involved consultations with the partnership and local recorders as well to review and update the list of locally important species in Powys. So these are basically species of conservation concern within the area. And the consultancy also obviously reviewed all of the available habitat and connectivity map data to produce the maps that we've just seen. And then from all of these reviews and consultations, the consultancy then produced a draft Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan. However, the funding then ran out, so the partnership was never actually able to finalise or publish the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan in 2018 as planned. So everything's been on a bit of a standstill for a while, unfortunately, but we have now picked up from where we left off this year. So just to give you an idea of the structure of the plan, the Nature Recovery Action Plan is going to be made up of the General Action Plan, which is just going to introduce the plan, what it is, why it's needed, the legislation behind it, what it's for, and it also introduces a list of sort of general action themes that the partnership will use to guide our work. There are then 7 habitat action plans. So there's one for woodlands, grasslands, scrub and freeze, upland habitats, freshwater and wetlands, urban and brownfield, and then linear habitats as well. So that's hedgerows, road verges, things like that. Part 3 will include the 2 grouped species action plans. We've got one for amphibians and reptiles combined, and then one for bat species as well. There's also going to be a shared species action plan with Carmarthenshire and Ceredigion local nature partnerships for red squirrels. So Carmarthenshire are leading on that work. Part 4 of the plan are the maps, which we've just gone over, and then part 5, which is what I'm working on at the moment, will include ideas on how members of the public, schools, community groups and businesses can help with the plan. So in part 5, as I mentioned before, we're looking at ways at how we can improve our habitats outside of that network of protected sites. So part 5 contains ideas for local actions, for individuals, community groups, schools, businesses, just how other people can join in and help nature recover. What we're trying to get across in this section is that everyone can make a difference, no matter how big or small. Our gardens provide suitable habitats for many species and so can form part of these ecological networks. So one key message I'd like to get across in part 5 certainly is to get everyone to stop being so neat and tidy, to make sure everyone understands that nature isn't neat. Pristine lawns and trimmed hedgerows are often of little biodiversity value. So we want to encourage everyone to create wild areas in their gardens. It could be school grounds or local green spaces as well. You can plant wildflower areas for pollinators, and just trying to persuade everyone that weeds are actually good and they're actually just wild plants and they're beneficial for species as well. Just generally trying to encourage more, nature-friendly gardening, whether it's creating dead wood piles or wildlife ponds as well. The aim is to highlight that there's something that everyone can do to help with this. Another suggestion in there as well for anyone that has the time and are keen to make a difference is that they can volunteer with local wildlife groups and their wildlife trust as well. Again, just trying to get across that everyone can help, and it doesn't matter if you're a wildlife expert or not. The more hands the better, really, and you'll learn as you go as well, won't you? So and lots of these groups are popping up all over the place already. Since I've been in post, we've had a number of groups pop up around the place that are helping to manage parks and road verges to benefit biodiversity. And we also want to encourage more people to record their wildlife they see as well. Without having lots of people on the ground sending in their records, it's hard to monitor changes in the numbers and distribution of species. Without the records, we can't tell which species are declining, where they're declining, or why. And it's so easy to get started with recording now as well. There's so much information available online. BIS have been doing lots of training on it recently as well, and that's all on YouTube now too. So it's so accessible, and obviously there's lots of ID guides and apps and things as well. So it's just trying to find ways that anyone can get involved in the plan, basically. And I do realise that I'm speaking to the converted here, looking at the people on screen. I know that you're doing all of these things already, so thank you. So once we've got the plan together, the next step is monitoring progress. So I'm currently working with the partnership to review the actions included in the plan. Because it was created a few years ago now, obviously it all started back in 2018, so we're just updating everything really, and then we'll be finalising the plan over the next few months, and then hopefully it'll be published early next year. And then once it's published, the next job is to deliver the plan and actually track our progress. So something to note is that the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan is going to be a dynamic document which will be regularly updated. Actions can be added or removed in response to update in local species and habitat information and changes in policy, legislation, funding and resources. So what's being published next year is simply going to be the starting point, and the plan will evolve over time. So in terms of monitoring, there is currently no standardised way for reporting on Nature Recovery Action Plan progress. So some of you might be aware that with the local biodiversity action plans, there used to be this system called BARS, which was Biodiversity Action Reporting System, where you could basically upload actions onto there to show what was going on across the country, basically. So in order to monitor our progress, sorry, but should mention BARS is no longer in use, so that's why we have no way of reporting at the moment. So our plan at the moment for reporting on progress is basically to compile a list of projects and activities taking place in Powys which contribute to the delivery of the plan. which will then be updated annually by the partnership until we get sort of standardised methods again for reporting on this. Obviously, many of the partnership organisations like the Wildlife Trusts are already delivering on many of these actions, but it doesn't matter how big or small these actions are either. It could be, you know, a huge landscape scale restoration project, or it could be a community group taking action to manage part of a local park for biodiversity. We basically need to know what's happening and where, so we can support each other, share our knowledge and skills and resources wherever possible. Now, I say that we're hopefully going to be able to compile this list to report on progress, because at the moment we're in a bit of a tricky situation, as my position's only funded until March next year. So I'm actually unsure if I'm going to be in post to carry out this work and all of this monitoring, etc. Although the partnership still will be able to use the plan, obviously, to guide their work. But hopefully more funding will come through so we can continue with this, because as I mentioned before, the partnerships do need sort of these coordinator roles in post, just to bring everyone together, to organise meetings, to pester them for updates, and identify opportunities for partnership working, and also to keep them up to date on what everyone else in the partnership is up to as well, to identify opportunities where we can team up. But yeah, anyway, hopefully some more funding will appear, and yeah, hopefully should know by the end of the year if I can stay or not to carry on this work. Oh, it's been a bit slow. So I think this is coming up to my last slide now. So something else I also wanted to mention is, if any of you are interested in helping the partnership with the work on the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan, then you're more than welcome to get involved in the reviewing process. You're welcome to read through drafts and provide comments on and your thoughts on the actions that we're planning to take. You don't have to be part of the partnership to do this. You know, we're keen to get any sort of local recorders and naturalists involved in this process. I am also on the lookout for some volunteer proofreaders too, if anyone's particularly keen to do that, just to make sure everything's in order before we start the publishing process later in the year. Also, if anyone's interested in joining the Powys Nature Partnership too, you're more than welcome to. Anyone with the time, skills or expertise to support the work of the partnership is welcome to join in. As I was saying, you know, the purpose is to share our skills and knowledge and to work together to coordinate local action. And please also spread the word if you do know anyone that might like to get involved with the work on the Powys Nature Recovery Action Plan or join the partnership. And there we go, that is over to James now. I'm going to have to hand over host again, and then there's my email too if anyone would like to get in touch, and I will stop sharing my screen, and then hopefully I can pass the host back over to James.
Thanks, Holly. That was great and really interesting. So if everybody's okay, we'll carry on, and you know, I'll do my bit, and then we can take some questions at the end. Just spotted there's a few people that have just joined us and are coming through from the waiting room. So I'll just queue up my slides. Right. So share my screen. So here we go then, yeah. So great. So you've all disappeared down in the sidebar. So yeah, following on. So we've heard from Holly about sort of the technical elements. So really what we've been looking at is a process whereby all the underpinning data is pulled together really. So then that can help guide future funding, and that future funding could come from private sources, but it could or will most likely also come through the new subsidy system, which is going to be the Sustainable Farming Scheme in Wales. And that is going to be geared towards paying public money for public benefits, really. So, you know, clean air, good soils, clean water, biodiversity and access. I think really, you know, well, what I'm going to try and do now is really sort of illustrate how you take that information and then work with it on the ground, because you know, I've often said during my career that actually ecology and you know that the science behind conservation and nature recovery is actually quite easy in a lot of ways. You know, you can study it, you can identify the problems, you know what you need to do, but securing funding and good policy can be quite tricky for lots of reasons. And then You know, without people buying into this process, and without numbers, and without people wanting to make those changes, it's very difficult to deliver anything on the ground. So where is the Wildlife Trust at the moment? So we really now have got to the point where we thought, okay, we've come a long way. You know, the Wildlife Trust as a movement is 100 years old, really now. And we've been doing quite traditional site-based conservation. And I hope we can all agree that the world is a better place because we've done that. And, you know, we've grown, we've gone from often having one member of staff, a dog on a string, and some very keen trustees and volunteers to, in some cases, you know, trusts averaging 50 to 100 staff now. You know, Radnorshire Wildlife Trust itself is actually now at its largest point in terms of staff. We've got 16 people in posts and 3 major projects on the go, and that's very exciting. But we're shifting now towards talking about nature's recovery and bringing wildlife back. And this simple diagram here is really going to underpin our focus for the next 10 years. So, you know, we've got that UN target of trying to get 30% of the land and the sea managed for nature by 2030. And a lot of people have said, well, what does that look like? You know, how is that different? So for context, we are currently at 5% of the land being managed well for nature conservation. So we've got quite a long way to go. And what we're talking about is nature first. So we're talking about nature reserves, we're talking about wilding or rewilding, however you feel comfortable talking about that. Extensive management really across large areas. We're talking about, you know, taking marginal areas really and putting nature at the forefront. So, you know, that's going to come through a combination of sources, and that's going to be done by public bodies and private estates as well, we think, in some cases, because people are going to perhaps have to build a new model of land management where diversification, you know, moves towards ecotourism and hospitality with low levels of food production potentially, and then, you know, lots of public benefits such as natural flood management. And what does that mean? I mean, essentially it means, you know, allowing floodplains to function and hold water. It means that you've got healthy soils with high levels of organic matter, so they absorb lots of water. And it means that you've got natural features that help slow rainfall off the slopes, so you don't get big flood surges in changing weather. That's sort of where we need to move to, really. We also know, I mean, all along we've known that, again, we can't do this alone. So, you know, down here in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got this aspiration of getting 1 in 4 people to take action. And what does taking action mean? Well, it means, you know, signing petitions, because sometimes it's a numbers game, isn't it? Policy does follow people. And it can be quite disheartening, can't it? Because you think, well, I signed that, I did this, I did that, where did it get? But you know, you must never lose hope. You must never give up. You know, when you want change, it can be quite difficult. And actually filling up ministers' inboxes or MPs' inboxes, it does have some impact. And it does help the work at national Welsh level and the national UK level, because, you know, we can then have conversations with ministers and, you know, talk about advocacy and what policy might need to change and how we can help deliver those solutions. But action also, you know, it goes back to individual action, doesn't it? Boycotting things or, you know, actively purchasing some things over another, that all counts. But for a wildlife trust, you know, we're quite a practical organisation. That also means working with people in the community and encouraging fantastic work that people have done around verges, for instance, or public spaces. And I think perhaps it's not something that's quite filtered through yet, but there's a shift in mindset within the wildlife trusts, because historically we used to get funding or we used to create a staff post and do a project. And we'd then say to people, hey, come join our project and do our thing and do it our way. But now we're thinking about how we can build movements and facilitate action. So it's much more about sending people out to say, we can help. You know, we've got expertise in that area, we can help, let's work together, and here's some pointers, or, you know, here's some training. And then we've got, you know, the climate crisis. You know, I think the Wildlife Trust is going to be talking about that a lot more now. And we're going to be promoting the fact that cannot tackle climate crisis in isolation from the ecological crisis. You know, the solutions are really intertwined. And, you know, Holly's spoken a lot about the need to restore peat bogs. Well, you know, peat sequesters rather more carbon if we were to restore all of, you know, the deep peat across the UK, then all of the woodland in England, France, Germany, I think Belgium as well. I mean, it's huge amount of carbon can be sequestered in that way. And as a movement, the Wildlife Trusts have pledged to get to net zero by 2030, because on their own, those nature-based solutions, as we call them, those natural sorts of forms of management, where you're sort of easing off the pressure on the land and perhaps putting nature first, or, you know, redesigning land in a different way. So, you know, you've got much more in the way of restored floodplains, for instance. You know, that could only really deal with about 37% of our annual carbon emissions. So we've got to reduce carbon usage as well. I don't know if you've seen, there's quite an interesting graph doing the rounds at the moment, whereby sort of says that we're basically already locked into 1.5 degrees of warming. And if you add up all the pledges that large organisations and local authorities have taken, we're actually still at a point where we're going to get over 2 degrees of warming, probably about 2.5. But then when you look at policy, we're locked into over 3 degrees of warming at the moment. And that is, you know, in the year of COP26, when we're all excited about the pledges that are going to be made. And, you know, I think, what are we saying? We're saying we need to be aware of that. We need to realise that sometimes what's said in the media and what's drummed up as being positive perhaps isn't necessarily always underpinned by the right sort of action, and we need to keep calling for change. But we also need to say that we're at a point now where just sort of trying to reduce carbon and adapt is not enough. We've actually got to mitigate for the changes that we're going to get. So if you look at some of the risk mapping for Wales is likely to experience by 2050 prolonged periods of drought, which is going to, you know, threaten some of the peat bogs and the carbon that's sequestered there. And then we're going to have lots more flash flooding and lots more high rainfall events. So again, we're going to have to think about how we manage the land to mitigate that. I'll just go over this one quite quickly, but this is a Wildlife Trust wide strategy which we all sign up to. So yeah, it's got our 3 goals there, and it's got 5 transformations and 5 enabling priorities. So, you know, you can see some of the things I've just talked about there in terms of working with communities. And, you know, we've always tried to inspire people and engage with younger people. And, you know, we're going to continue to do that. We are going to try and change the level of funding that's attracted into conservation. There's lots of talk, if you read the media at large, about, you know, a green economy and what that might look like. People like Mark Carney have got quite excited about the opportunities that might come from transitioning towards net zero. But, you know, we're here tonight on Zoom, aren't we? Which a couple of years ago was unheard of. And we're very active on social media, and we've got our e-newsletter now. So we're going to have to continue to embrace that digital element of engaging with people. And for a county like Radnorshire, that's important, I think, because, you know, we have a fantastic membership and a very loyal membership. But, you know, there's actually quite a high percentage of the county population are members, and, you know, thanks to everybody that is with us. But we're in a very low population area, so social media is a relatively low cost way of getting out to large numbers of people, you know, more people that come here on holiday. But just have a quick look at those enabling priorities. We've got to make sure our own house is in order, so we've got to make sure our sites are managed to the best that we can possibly do. And we've got to, you know, make sure we stick with having evidence-based policies. And we've got to invest in our staff, you know, give them lots of training, because it's a fast changing world now, and people need to be able to be confident across a wide range of areas. And number 5 there is really important, I think, and something that perhaps the trusts haven't always remembered to do, but we need to speak with a bold voice, you know, speak truth to power and make sure we are calling for change and positive change and showing that we're working with people, because, you know, as I say, that's what it takes sometimes to get things through. So in terms of practical delivery, I've lifted some slides from Sarah Woodcock's fantastic presentation on the Green Connections project. And Sarah is our conservation officer, has been in post about 4 or 5 months now. So Green Connections is a Welsh Government funded project working across Powys, and it's great to be able to work in conjunction with our colleagues at Wildlife Trust of South and West Wales and Montgomeryshire. You know, these are the project themes, you know, support Powys County Council, and, you know, we're doing work through Holly, and in fact we do attend the Powys Nature Partnership. I do chair that currently at the moment, and we've been feeding in, trying to work on a trees and climate change policy, but we are also supporting the county's work with road verges and this rollout of the NRAP and the review of the habitat action plans. We're obviously working with landowners, that's a big thing, and we'll come on to that in a minute. We're trying to undertake specific habitat management work for rare and uncommon species. We have Janice in post, who's helping community groups, and we'll touch a little bit on that shortly. And then we're going to be providing training. So this project runs till March 2023, and a dream project really for Radnorshire in many ways, and we're hoping we can get some continuation funding for it, but don't quite know what that will look like. And, you know, as a project, it can do a huge amount, but perhaps it needs to be run alongside in the future some whole farm advice around, you know, that could be delivered through the new agriculture bill potentially, and the funding that comes off the back of that. But again, we don't know, because it's probably just worth saying that, you know, there's all this excitement and all this change, and it feels like there's a lot of opportunity, and we need to really try and make sure we're positioned to help capitalise on that. But there is also still quite a lot of uncertainty about the funding. You know, there's this talk about public payment for public benefits. But we don't actually know like how much and what for and when, really, not in any detail anyway. So landowners. So this is just a sort of visual representation of the landowners that Sarah's been able to deal with in the short time that she's been here. So she's been out and given advice to people. She's paid all of these people a first visit, and has sort of worked with them to understand where they are, what they're thinking, and what advice they might need, and then has sort of thought about the common themes, because there's we need to produce various guides and various materials to help people do the right thing, really, because we can't be everywhere all the time. So it's just worth saying at this point that, you know, if anybody has contacted Sarah and hasn't heard from her, she will get to you. You know, she's very organised, but she's also very busy. You know, we've been inundated with calls for help, which is great, but obviously we can only go as quick as we can, and we've still been working under the very tail end of the lockdown rules, and certainly when we all started in post, we were still pretty heavily under lockdown. So we were slightly curtailed in the activity we could undertake, and that's eased, and we've been out to lots of events, but it is still taking us time to get around with people and catch up on the backlog. So here's just a quick selection of the, you know, sorts of land we're getting asked to give advice on, and it's been really pretty pleasing, really. You know, I think as Holly said, this is not a particularly developed part of the world, is it? And you know, we have got people that have farmed quite extensively for a long time, and we've got people that are really supportive of nature and managing their land and nature. So we've got people from, you know, smallholder size up through to, I think, small to medium-sized farms. I think I'm correct in saying we don't yet have anybody that's, you know, what you might call a intensive farmer, or, you know, like a big farm business. But, you know, we hope that could come in time. But, you know, I think we need to focus on the positives. We're getting invited along to some pretty good sites, and I've chosen tonight not to show Sarah's and the project's underpinning data. on the spread of the sites and how it ties in with the various designations, and how the triple SIs that Holly spoke about fit in with the sites of importance for nature conservation and the local wildlife sites. If you want to know that sort of detail, I'd really recommend getting along to one of Sarah's talks, or one of the team's talks, because it's well worth hearing. So in addition to giving that landowner advice, we are working with people like Andy Shaw to do species restoration. We've got globe flower growing at the moment. We've got, through the Ross Pasture Project, Devil's Bit scabious growing, and we're looking to do targeted reintroductions where we need to intervene because we think local extinction is a risk. That's quite fun, and again, it throws up lots of questions about at what point do you intervene, how do you intervene, where do you get the seed from, where do you take it? But it's a positive thing to do. It's something that gets a lot of support, and it's something we'll be trying to build a network of people to enable us to do more of through this project. So quite exciting sightings over this spring and summer period. I think Darryl found the 3rd or 4th record for longhorn bee on a road verge not far from where she lives. We think, maybe there's more out there that we don't know about. So, keep your eyes out. Again, we've had other good records across the summer, and we need to map those records. We need to understand what those species need, and we need to feed it into Holly's work. And then, as importantly, tell people about it. Get it on in our newsletter, get it out through our social media, get people like you to understand what's going on, and get more people looking, so we can help gather excitement about the special wildlife of Radnorshire. Janice and Phil have been out helping community groups. We've been going to events, we've been running training courses, we've been working quite a bit with citizen science groups through largely the Friends of the Upper Wye and the Friends of the Lug. And we've also been doing some staff training, and in time we'll look to do volunteer training and training for community groups, really. Here's just a little spread of the community groups we're involved with. So again, it just shows that we've got a reasonable spread. If you know anybody who's active and out there that is doing good things and might benefit from being put in touch with the project, please do get them to drop us a line. The red triangles are people that we've quite active with, are quite established groups, and then these amber triangles down the bottom are sort of projects we're involved in, but not quite so heavily, and perhaps they're slightly different in nature. So down on the bottom right, that's Friends of the Upper Wye, because they're based around Hay. And then the one on the left is Gilly, which is a private estate, which has just got a rather good amount of funding through one of the recent lottery threads for nature networks. And that's not far from our Clanbuckland Lake site, and is in an area where there is quite a high density of already pretty reasonable land for nature. And we're very much looking forward to working with them and advising and feeding into the Green Connections project. Right, let's just get this next slide. So just thought I'd quickly show this. This is a map of all of the citizen science monitoring points. So on the left, you've got Radnorshire, and on the right, you've got the English side of the YSAC. Obviously, we've got further training to undertake for the Lug, which is here on the top right and the top sort of northern point, I suppose, on the compass. We're hoping to fill in quite a lot of the gaps there on the Lug. We're doing pretty well on the Y, and obviously scope to do more, but we're hoping by autumn we'll start to have the first meaningful data sets to help us understand what's going on, and that can help feed into other work we're doing to try and inform change, because the Y is a very interesting catchment because it's split across England and Wales, and you've got differences in message and differences in understanding about what's happening there. But one thing we have realised, and this is really sort of crystallise their thinking on is this is a very important issue to local people. So being able to facilitate what is seen and feels like positive action is a very powerful thing, actually. So I just thought I'd show this one last slide of a map. I mean, left-hand side, we've seen that infograph, I suppose it is, already tonight from Holly, and that's out of the Lawton Review, Making Space for Nature. And we've seen some of Holly's slides which show what those opportunity maps look like, you know, when you're just looking at the biological side. But what we've got here on the right is a map of all of the landowners that Radnorshire Wildlife Trust are either engaged with or have given meaningful advice to over the last, I think, 10 years. So Sarah spent quite a bit of time when she first started going through all the files. So you can see there's some pleasing clusters there, some clusters around areas where there are community groups, and some clusters around where we are currently engaged in landowners. We're going to work towards a point where we map up that opportunity, so the opportunity of people with the biological opportunity, and then that starts to become the sort of living map and the living nature recovery network, because it's a network of people as well as the network of habitats on the ground. Now, I think it's going to be really exciting to get to that point. So, Ross pasture restoration. Here we go. So, I'll just be very brief on this one. Got a fantastic logo, which has been done by a local artist, Jess Illustration, who lives in Pristine. You know, it's quite a concentrated project. We're working with 9 core landowners at the moment, and we're looking to really just increase people's understanding of Ross pasture and their appreciation of Ross pasture, and think about how we position it in this changing world. You know, it's an internationally significant habitat, really, and it's a habitat we've got quite a lot of, and you know, it perhaps doesn't fit so easily within some people's modern farming system because it's not seen as highly productive land, but managed well, it's great for all of those things we've been talking about, you know, carbon and water storage being 2 really important ones. And in some cases, you know, these sites have got quite a bit of peat on them. But we're looking at, through this project, at how we perhaps market Ross products, whether we could get a Ross brand, whether that could then feed into the rise we've seen in ecotourism. You know, some of this stuff has been tried before, but times have changed, and I think we need to think about how we position that message for the current world, really, and how that might filter out through an online world, really. You know, the millennials and younger are very, you know, if you look at all the research, very experience-based. You know, we in Radnorshire are within that magic 2 hours of quite a lot of cities, and you know, that's where the magic travel time for where people come for weekend breaks. So, you know, we've potentially got an audience there of people that want to have an experience in nature or support some local food producers, and they're prepared to pay quite a lot of money for that. We need to think about how we can position Ross pasture in that, so that the landowners that have got these sites can benefit. And we know from our launch event that people do want to do the right thing, and they are trying to find ways to make it work. And you know, they're really good at doing the doing. They perhaps just need the help around the edge, or they need the help in coordinating efforts, really. Yeah, we've got a great community and arts and heritage thread on that project too. So we've actually commissioned an artist in residence. He's going to be working over the next couple of years, because again, this project runs till March 2023, to look at how you can engage more people through the arts, but also how you can better represent Ross pasture to perhaps a different crowd, a different market. But again, as with Green Connections, we are also training people on what they've got. You can see Ray Woods there down on his knees, doing a bit of good old botanical ID, and you know, some key Radnorshire people, MT Gibson Watts and Richard Knight there in the background. And, it's been nice to see people get together like that in this as we come out of lockdown. So yeah, that I'm afraid is the obligatory partners slide, but we are very pleased to be working with CARAD on the community arts side and Rada by Nature. They've been fantastic supporters throughout this last 6 months. So Stand for Nature, that's a Pan Wales project, and I couldn't talk about what we're doing at the moment without talking about this project. So we're working with people that are 9 to 24, and we are trying to build a youth forum, and we are trying to connect people with local projects and inspire people to take action and really build the future conservationists and environmentalists. So, if you know any people that fit in that age bracket, please do nudge them our way. We've got a great start to our youth forum, and we've got some younger members, I think mostly around 9 to 11. We could do with some teenagers really and above, because we can start to do different things with them and get them a bit more involved in some of them, the policy side really, and the local campaigning. So how can you help? Well, again, as Holly said, a lot of people here tonight are pretty engaged already, but as we're recording this, this is going to go out, so it's still worth saying these things. I mean, just from Radnorshire Wildlife Trust point of view, obviously joining as a member is hugely important, as are donations and legacies, because that gives us unrestricted income, and that helps build, core staff, and helps us pay for the day-to-day stuff that projects won't always. But we need you guys to help spread the word. We need you to take action. At the moment, we've got our Save the Wye campaign. We've got over nearly 1,500 people have sent letters to Julie James and Leslie Griffiths, and if they live in Wales, their local MS. So we've got over 4,000 letters have gone out, and we'll be keeping that campaign going till we get a satisfactory response, and then it may evolve into whatever the next problem is on the Wye. At the moment, we've focused on the agricultural pollution, and we need to get that better recognised and swifter action taken. We've also just done a press release, because we've done an open letter through actually the Powys Nature Partnership to the Powys County Councillors, calling for the declaration of an ecological emergency. Now, thankfully, a local councillor has raised that motion and it's been seconded, and it will be put to the vote in 2 days' time at an all council meeting. So, there's still time for you to email your local councillor and ask them to support that vote. You can cite the open letter. It's on the news section of our website. But we really need that to get through, and we really need that to get through so nature can be given an equal weight into climate in Radnorshire and across Powys. And we really need to recognise the value of posts and people. Really, it goes back to people, doesn't it? People like Holly. The fact that Holly's post isn't certain beyond March is causing us concern, and having a plan is only the start. We've got to do the delivering, and the Wildlife Trust will do their best to try and keep the Powys Nature Partnership going, but it's a big commitment without somebody in post with funding to help, pull people together and, keep people interested and produce good materials. We need people to get involved, so that's volunteering for us, but that's also, taking action, spreading the word, and it's highlighting opportunity. If you can think of somebody that perhaps wouldn't have heard about our project, but might own some land that would be suitable for being included or for getting a visit through Green Connections, put them in touch. It might take us a while to get around to them, but we will. And, I think that's just the start, isn't it? That's really important. We can set them up for doing good things in the future. And connect people. We need the doers and the movers and the shakers to be talking to one another, so we can share our learnings and we can sort of, keep each other motivated, and we can make sure that we're focusing our efforts in a pretty unified way. And I think I will stop there and and say thanks for listening, and I will stop sharing my screen.